Our next speaker is the managing director of a research agency called Ipsos. Steve Murphy has started his career at FGT Marketing and then moved from niche media buying to market research with RSL. And he then made his move to Asia when he joined Sinovate in Hong Kong, where he was director for 3 years. He rejoined Ipsos in 2010 to set up the Malaysia office, which is fantastic. So very much a startup, just like Google in Malaysia, and growing. He's here to sort of talk about a lot of the research, and this is very recent research that was done in Malaysia, very cutting edge, and he's here to talk about it and share this with you. Please welcome Steve Murphy.
Hello, good afternoon. Unlike Tommy, I don't have any jokes to start off with. Although I will say, I don't think I look at my mobile phone 150 times a day. I've never caught a butterfly with my mobile phone, and I do brush my teeth every day. Okay, I'm going to be talking for about the next 20-25 minutes on a survey that was commissioned by Google, a global survey, to Ipsos via our Germany office. And I'm going to be focusing really on the Malaysia portion. I've been in Malaysia 10 years, so even though I'm British, I kind of count myself as a little bit Malaysian. And we're going to be talking about the whole mobile consumer evolution. So as I say, this was part of a global survey. And you can see from all of those maps there that this was a survey that was pretty broad in terms of its diversity. So we can see Malaysia is one of those markets. And you might not be able to see the penetration of smartphones in each of those markets, but you'll be able to see that Malaysia is, for the time being, one of the lower penetration markets. And we'll talk about why that is, and we'll talk about also how that will change over the next few years. As you can see, lots of the neighboring countries of Malaysia have higher penetrations there. So I'm going to be talking through, in terms of the agenda, a bit of the background of the objectives. So why did Google commission this survey, and what was the background to the whole survey? What were the objectives in terms of what we wanted to find out from the research? So very clear and concise objectives. A little bit about the research design, so how we went about collecting the data, who we spoke to, what kind of questions that we asked. Very quickly, the management summary, so the key findings, on a very straightforward survey, really, to find the big picture of the situation of smartphones in Malaysia and how that's changing. Then digging into some of the mobile internet insights, and finally some of the demographics in terms of the sample population versus the smartphone Malaysian population. So just a little bit about the background. So we all know, most of us know, that the mobile internet is a key driver of growth online today, the key driver of growth online today. I've been in Malaysia 10 years now, and I know what the mobile phone penetration was 10 years ago versus where it is today, and therefore I think we can understand how important the mobile revolution has already been in Malaysia, and how important the smartphone revolution will be for the next phase in Malaysia. So the rapid adoption by consumers will offer opportunities to many businesses for new revenue streams. So therefore, it's obviously important for us all, for Google, but for probably most people in this room, to understand the usage patterns of consumers today with their mobile phones, with their smartphones, because that will give us, therefore, the base of how we should be positioning our products and brands for the future. So, as I say, the objectives were very straightforward, really to measure the significance of mobile internet usage on smartphones across the world, and obviously looking at Malaysia in particular, but putting that within a context of the globe. And that's obviously what Google is doing with this multi-country survey. So we wanted to look at, in particular, of course, the digitally educated population, so people who are early adopters of mobile and taking up smartphones, but put it in the perspective of the general population. So really look at the big picture of where we are today with smartphones and how that is changing. So the research design was, we did face-to-face interviews. It was conducted amongst the general population of 18 to 64-year-olds, representatives of the Peninsular Malaysia population. So a very short and concise questionnaire looking at usage of devices and ownership of devices, mobile phones, smartphones, etc. The type of brands that are being adopted and the operating systems for the smartphones, and also looking at their general internet usage behavior, whether that be on the mobile phone or via their laptop computer. So just looking at the management summary first. So you can see on the right-hand side of that chart, 9% private smartphone users seems low, and it is low for Malaysia still. But as we'll see as we go through this survey, as I say, 10 years ago, the normal mobile phone penetration was relatively low. So for smartphones, it's a question of time. And I don't think that much time. It's a question of economy on people being rich enough to be able to afford a smartphone, and also the purchasing price of a smartphone being accessible. So we've seen how quickly that has changed over the past 5-10 years for normal mobile phones. So in terms of the devices, what we know about smartphones is most people have their first smartphone. So 4 out of 5 people have their first smartphone. That really shows, therefore, the potential of smartphones for the next few years. The brands that people are using are the brands that we kind of expect, so it's Nokia and Sony Ericsson and Samsung. In terms of their web behavior, people have already embraced internet usage on their phone. And as they get to know their phone and they get to be more comfortable with their phones and their usage behavior, we'll see the gap between what they're surfing on the phone versus what they're surfing on the computer and PC diminishes. The demographics was a bit more surprising to me. So we see from the data that the smartphone universe at the moment is more dominated by females. So it was obviously the population is a 50-50 split. In terms of the smartphone universe, it's almost a 2/3 female, 1/3 male universe. So that was a little bit surprising. No surprising to know that smartphone adopters are young. They tend to be of high incomes, living in urban centres and working. So just dipping into some of the mobile internet insights. So first of all, as I say, we wanted to look at the big picture. So we wanted to speak to a representative sample of the population, and then we wanted to look at the penetration of smartphones in particular. So we saw from the initial data, 9% of the 1,000 people that we spoke to have a smartphone and use a smartphone. And there's a few people who had multiple phones. Most people had one phone, whether that be a normal phone, mobile phone, or a smartphone. And where there was multiple usage, we asked about their main device. So this is, again, thinking about the total Malaysian population. So we can see 95% of the Malaysian population have a mobile phone. So even though we saw the smartphone penetration is relatively low, the total mobile phone penetration in Malaysia is incredibly high. So Malaysians love mobile phones. And as soon as the conditions are right, Malaysians will adopt smartphones quicker than we can anticipate. So 95% of Malaysians have a mobile phone. If you look at the ownership or usage of laptops, notebooks, desktops, PCs, it's relatively more restricted. So the kind of ownership of laptops and PCs is a bit more related to urban centres and whether they're working and whether they have an access to a computer at work. We know Malaysia is a very diverse country in terms of urban centres, semi-urban, rural centres. The mobile phone goes across all of those different sectors in a way that the computers don't. If we look at the take-up or the penetration of some of the other devices such as MP3, the webbook, handheld gaming devices, penetrations are still relatively low. So we can see mobile phone really has a central role already in the Malaysian society. If we look at the number and types of phone used, no surprise to know that most people in Malaysia only have one phone. So 83%. We know that 5% don't have a phone at all, because we saw the mobile phone penetration was 95%. Most people will have one phone, and generally that will be a normal mobile phone. We can see 5% there have gone straight to a smartphone, so just one phone but a smartphone. A few people, 11% of people have two phones. and a very small percentage have more than 2 phones. So, you know, still a population that loves mobile phones and is adapting mobile phones quickly. In terms of the share between mobile phones versus smartphone, as a total universe, still smartphone as a small percentage of the share. But we can be fairly sure that is going to change very quickly. And we'll see, and we know why, and we'll see why in the next few slides. We know that Malaysians, first of all, they love phones. We know that they also love internet usage. They love going onto social networks. They love going via search engines. So you put those together, and a smartphone obviously represents that. So what this means for the smartphone universe is that this is a relatively immature market. So when we ask most people, is this your first smartphone? Most people say yes. So 83% of people who currently own a smartphone, for them, this is their first smartphone. And most of them, many of them, have bought it in the past year. So if you look on the right-hand side at the duration of usage, you can see that almost 50% have taken up their smartphone in the past year. So this is the market that is almost doubling within a very short period. So there's massive potential for smartphones in the future. In terms of the brands that they've taken up, there's 2 different types of columns on that chart. The one of which is representative of the total population of Malaysia, which is very small, and the one below which is representative of the smartphone universe. So Nokia is the key brand in terms of smartphones with 40% share of the smartphone universe, followed by Sony, Samsung, Apple, BlackBerry. In terms of operating systems, you can see on the right-hand side, operating systems, less well-known, so many people might not even know the name of their operating system. But Symbian, Android, iOS, BlackBerry are the main operating systems recalled by people for their mobile phones. In terms of a smartphone user, I think we've invented a word there, a smartphoner. A smartphone is mobile web usage behavior. You can see they are using the internet, they are sending emails, they're using search engines, going onto social networks, and sending videos fairly regularly. So pretty much 2/3 to 3/4 of people who own a smartphone are using that smartphone for a pretty diverse group of activities. So high means basically more than once a week, medium maybe a few times a month, and less than low is, I mean, maybe once a month or less. So very strong adoption already of the various activities that you can do once you own a smartphone. What we looked at amongst those people who have a smartphone, we asked them about their usage of the internet via their smartphone versus via their computer. And not surprisingly, many people still have greater weight of usage of the internet on their computer. But I'm pretty sure if we'd have measured this 3, 4 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, the gap would have been much larger than it is now. So people adopting the mobile very much for the same activities that they've been using on their computer for many, many years. So you can just look at the comparisons there for general internet usage for email. Many people already using their mobile smartphone for emails. Search engines. Also very extensively used already via smartphones. Social networking. Malaysians love to social network. The gap has definitely changed over the past few years. Of course, on the computer, very high levels of regular usage, but that's already coming through into the smartphone usage as well. Video sharing. The gap between the PC or the computer versus the mobile, the smartphone is a lot less. Because obviously people can take the photo on their smartphone and instantly send that video to somebody, and that's obviously why the gap is relatively less. So pretty much so we're not going to go. There's lots more information within the survey. This is the big picture of where we are at the moment to give you a kind of first cut of that type of data. And we'll just quickly go into the demographics, and then that will be my slot. So say, when I was going through this data and looking at the data, one of the biggest surprises for me was really the demographic split, showing female leading the charge on adoption of smartphones. Not surprising to see some of the other demographics. So who else are the kind of early adopters of smartphones? Younger people, so the average age is a lot younger than the general universe. People with a higher education, more likely to adopt smartphones, no surprise there. People who are in working and either single or married. In terms of household size and number of children, no skew whether they're smartphone users or not. Why should there be? Of course, there's a very clear skew in terms of household income. So once people hit a certain threshold in terms of their monthly household income, the likelihood to take up a smartphone is massively enhanced. And the final one is also quite interesting in terms of the split of the smartphone universe versus the general Malaysian universe. So I was, of course, expecting urban or metropolitan citizens to have taken up smartphones extensively. But I was surprised that the proportion of people living in rural locations is so high for smartphone universes. So then, again, this goes to the point that I think smartphones, in some locations, almost becomes, can replace their computer. It can be part of their kind of lifestyle. And therefore, the skew between rural and urban is not quite as enhanced as I thought it would be. So again, for me, that shows the real potential of smartphones, and I'm sure if I'm doing the same presentation in a year's time or 2 years' time, we're going to see that penetration of smartphone in Malaysia to be much higher than it is at the moment. There's lots of potential. Thank you very much.